I always believed you could feel the shift before the truth reveals itself. A slow unraveling, a hesitation in a sentence, a pause before a kiss. Daniel and I had been married for 12 years. Our life in Portland was what most would call stable. Dinner at 7, weekend hikes, holiday cards with smiling faces. But lately, the routine felt hollow. He was present, yet somehow distant, like a man standing behind frosted glass, visible but unreachable. It started with the late nights. First, once a week, then twice. Always client dinners or team meetings that ran over. The excuses came too easily, too rehearsed. He stopped asking how my day was. He stopped noticing the small things, my haircut, the way I'd wait up for him. Then came the perfume. It wasn't mine. A flowery, youthful scent I didn't recognize. I found it clinging to his collar after a Tuesday meeting. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I wanted to be sure. I needed more than a scent and a hunch. I began to watch. I noticed how he angled his phone away when texting, how he smiled at it. Not the way he smiled at me once, but with anticipation. When I casually asked about work, he'd change the subject or speak in vague generalities. And then, one night, I found a restaurant receipt in the pocket of his jacket. 2 entrees. 1 bottle of Pinot Noir. A date, not a meeting. And it wasn't even a weekend. That's when I knew. I spent the next day pacing the kitchen, clutching the receipt like it might confess something deeper if I stared long enough. The reservation was for a small bistro downtown. Intimate, candlelit. Not the kind of place you take a coworker to discuss quarterly reports. I needed a name, a face. Through Daniel's office party photos on social media, I found her. Tina Moore. Mid-30s, soft blonde curls, always standing a little too close in every group shot. The comments between them weren't flirtatious, just enough to fly under the radar. But women notice what men think they're hiding. What I didn't expect was her husband. Scrolling through Tina's profile, I found him, Mark Moore. He looked ordinary. Button-down shirts. Soccer dad energy. A man who probably kissed his wife goodbye each morning with a coffee in hand and no idea who she really was. I hesitated for days before messaging him. Hi, Mark. I believe your wife and my husband may be involved in something inappropriate. I don't want to cause drama. Just answers. If you're willing to talk, I'll explain everything. He replied within the hour. We met in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the bistro. Mark was quiet, stiff with disbelief. But when I showed him the photos, Tina's comments, Daniel's restaurant receipt, the hotel rewards points he hadn't used with me, his eyes changed. Pain gave way to clarity. We didn't scream. We didn't cry. We planned. If they thought their secret was safe, we would be their mirror. And what better place than their favorite hiding spot? The reservation was made under a different name. Mark and I requested the table directly beside theirs. I wore my hair up, something I rarely did, and chose a black dress I hadn't touched in years. Mark wore a blazer and carried a book, pretending to read. We ordered wine and waited. As we sat across from each other, pretending to be strangers with shared silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not over Daniel, not over Tina, but over my own story. I wasn't the woman left in the dark anymore. And when the hostess walked past us, guiding Daniel and Tina to the table just beside ours, I didn't flinch. I smiled. The moment they walked in, the air shifted. Daniel's hand rested lightly on Tina's back as he guided her through the restaurant like a man confidently leading someone who wasn't his wife. She laughed, too loud, too free. Her arm brushed his. She didn't flinch. They hadn't seen us. Mark sat across from me, stiff as stone. His eyes never left Tina. I could hear his breathing, slow, heavy, controlled. I wanted to reach for his hand, offer some anchor in the chaos, but I didn't. We were both barely holding ourselves together. I couldn't risk pulling either of us under. Our plan was simple: observe, document, and leave. But nothing prepared me for the ache of actually seeing it unfold. Daniel sat directly beside me, separated only by a wooden partition that didn't quite reach the ceiling. I could hear everything. His voice was softer than usual, tender even. The kind of tone he hadn't used with me in months. Tina responded with flirtation laced in every word, every tilt of her head. "I booked that little cabin you mentioned," he said. "The one by the lake." "You did," she beamed. "I thought you were joking." "I don't joke about you." I nearly dropped my glass. Across the table, Mark blinked slowly, jaw clenched. I could see it in his face. The realization that the woman he came home to, the woman who shared his bed, was already building a second life without him. One filled with lake cabins and wine and secrets. I couldn't stop watching. Their hands brushed across the table. Tina giggled, lifting her wine glass. Daniel toasted her like a lover, not a colleague. I pressed my phone to my thigh, discreetly recording audio. Mark did the same. We didn't need a confrontation. We needed evidence. The waitress passed by, refilling glasses. Neither Daniel nor Tina noticed us. We were ghosts at the table beside them, silent, invisible, dangerous. It wasn't just the infidelity that cut deep. It was the ease. Daniel looked relaxed, alive. He leaned forward, told jokes. His smile lingered at the corners of his mouth. When was the last time I'd seen him laugh like that? When was the last time he'd looked at me that way? Mark cleared his throat, softly. "He's been doing this a while," he murmured. "He knows how to lie." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on them. So does she. They shared a dessert, one spoon, his hand on her knee, her fingers running across the back of his neck. Each gesture was another dagger, and yet, I didn't look away. I needed to feel it. I needed it to be real. At one point, Daniel glanced sideways, scanning the room. My heart skipped. His eyes hovered in our direction for a beat too long. I dropped my gaze to the menu, feigning interest. When I looked up, he was smiling again at her. I exhaled slowly. Safe. The check came. Tina reached for it playfully, but Daniel shook his head. "This one's on me," he said. "You're worth it." Mark made a quiet noise, something between a scoff and a breath, and pushed back slightly in his chair. I gently tapped his foot under the table. "Not yet," I whispered. They rose to leave. She took his arm. Their backs were to us. No lingering glance, no guilt in their step. Just two people stealing something they didn't earn. As they exited, I watched them disappear into the night, into whatever lie they'd built beyond that front door. Mark didn't speak right away. Neither did I. The table between us felt heavy with everything we couldn't say. Betrayal didn't feel like a storm. It felt like drowning in still water. Finally, he broke the silence. "I never thought she'd be capable of this." I looked him in the eye. I never thought he would either. We sat for another 5 minutes just breathing, not crying, not shouting, just sitting in the ruins of the life we thought we knew. As we stood to leave, Mark held the door open for me. "What now?" he asked. I looked up at him, voice steady. "Now, we let them destroy themselves." Revenge wasn't something I fantasized about. I didn't want drama, shouting, or scenes worthy of a courtroom TV show. What I wanted was simple, for Daniel to feel what I felt that night. The sting of humiliation, the weight of exposure. Mark and I didn't speak for 2 days after the dinner. We needed space to process. But when he finally called, his voice was calm, measured, like mine. "I'm ready," he said.
So was I.
We gathered the evidence carefully. Screenshots of Tina's flirtatious messages to Daniel. A PDF of the hotel reservation email I'd found in Daniel's cloud-synced inbox, booked under his company's expense account. Audio clips from the dinner, clear enough to pick up every damning phrase. But we didn't send it to each other's spouses. That would have been expected. Instead, I emailed everything to Daniel's HR department from an anonymous account. Mark did the same with Tina's firm. Both companies had strict policies about interoffice relationships, especially when one party held authority over the other, which Daniel did. It took less than a week. Daniel came home one evening, looking disoriented. The kind of look that said his world had cracked, but he didn't yet know how to hold the pieces. "They're investigating me at work," he muttered, loosening his tie. "Someone sent in something about Tina and me. I don't know how they found out." I stood in the kitchen, calmly slicing apples for a pie I didn't even plan to bake. "That's strange," I said, not looking up. "Maybe someone was watching." He blinked, hesitated. "Watching?" I turned to face him. "You are never as careful as you thought." For the first time in months, Daniel didn't have a reply. He sat at the table like a man slowly realizing his secrets weren't buried, just waiting to be uncovered. I didn't confront him with rage. That would have given him power, made him the center of the storm. Instead, I left the divorce papers on the nightstand, signed and dated. My lawyer would take it from there. Mark moved out of his home the same weekend. He left a copy of the same evidence for Tina on their kitchen table, along with a single sticky note. I hope he was worth it. She texted him 3 times. Called twice. He didn't answer. It was over. Or at least their lies were. The fallout came quietly. Daniel was placed on unpaid suspension. Tina was escorted out of her office building, her box of desk belongings hugged to her chest like a child caught cheating on a test. Neither of them spoke our names aloud, but they didn't have to. We were the shadow that shattered their illusion. Mark and I stayed in touch, not out of romance, but shared survival. We understood each other in a way no one else could. 2 strangers tethered by betrayal, watching our lives fall apart in parallel. Weeks passed. I found comfort in the silence, the peace of no longer pretending. I slept better. I stopped checking Daniel's location, stopped rereading old texts, stopped wondering what I did wrong. Because I hadn't failed. He had. One Saturday afternoon, I returned to the same bistro, alone this time. I wore the same black dress, hair pinned just the way it was that night. Not for nostalgia, but for closure. The waiter recognized me. "You were here a few weeks ago, right?" he asked with a curious smile. "You look lighter now." I smiled. I sat at the same table and ordered a glass of wine. I didn't look around, didn't expect to see ghosts. They were gone and I had stayed. There was no dramatic ending. No screaming affair caught on tape. Just a slow, deliberate unraveling, watched quietly from the table next door. Some might say I took the high road. Others might call it vengeance in disguise. But me? I call it freedom.